Climate change and its resulting effects of enormous land degradation and depletion of pasture in Borena are pushing the people of Borena to the brink. Erratic rainy seasons have also exacerbated the already scarce availability of water. And as a result, children are missing out on their education, and rates of malnutrition in the areas are affecting pregnant and breastfeeding women. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Addis Dialogue, and we'll be talking about these issues, and my guest today is Dawitola, who is doing her internship with the ICRC and who has also traveled and witnessed in person what is exactly going on there. With the program, I'm Shfaralak. Do stay with us. Dawi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.
So I'm so glad that you have traveled to Borena and seen the situations there. So I really want you to tell me how severe the situation is there as we speak. I've learned that there is not a place that's not been affected by the drought.
Yes.
So what's heartbreaking there?
As we traveled down to Borena, I was there about for 5 days, and I was able to cover 3 major areas called Taltelle, Dillo, and Moyale. And Taltelle, they're an agrarian community, so they're mostly known for their farming. So as you travel down to Taltelle, what you will see is you will see land that is already prepared for cultivating, but there is no sign of life. You can see that there has not been rain on the ground for a while because there's a lot of sandstorms going on in the entire area of Borena. And Dillo is mostly a pastoralist community, so they really relied a lot on their livestock, and there was no sign of livestock or any cattle that was that you could say visualize and that you would expect going to Borena. And in Moyale, same situation, like the heat was stronger there because the closer you got to Kenya, the worse it got. And usually people in Borena would travel to certain districts whenever certain areas are struck with drought, but it was the entire area in Borena. Also neighboring countries such as Kenya and Somalia were going through the same situation. So there was really no place or area for migration for the farmers or the pastoralist communities there.
So obviously the situation is, very heartbreaking.
It was very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
There was no life inside. There's no livestock. If you see any livestock available, they were very emaciated, thinned out. You can tell they had no market value for the farmers or the consumers. So that was very heartbreaking to see. You will see children struck with malnutrition because their main diet was like milk and red meat. So that huge loss in their diet was also very, very visible, making even the situation a lot more worse.
As you covered in your article, Borena has had a history of climate-induced situations or climate-induced droughts. So what are some of the factors that have led to the drought?
Borena is not new to drought or any type of climate-induced emergencies or humanitarian crises. What made this one unique is it has been very continuous. There has not been rain this is the 5th cycle. So it is very new and unfamiliar to the leaders or the people of Borena on how to cope during this time, because it was just the longevity and the magnitude of the drought was just not seen or heard of for the people. So it was very more difficult for them to cope. But I would say the main factor is there has not been, what would you say, they haven't utilized climate resilient technologies, whether it be irrigation, whether it be soil pump, any type of response that is needed for areas that are struck with drought. Yeah. So definitely I would say climate change was one of them. And second would also be the lack of education and lack of policies that exist when it comes to land use or grazing or limitation on overpopulation of cattle, because they have a very dense population of cattle. Yeah. So all of those things add onto the prolongment of this drought. So I would say definitely those 3 factors would add onto prolonging or lack of response of it.
The drought situation has also affected the multi-spectrum of societal strata, if you will. So it has definitely affected the social status of the people of Borena. And as you have eloquently written in your article, there are two types of societies or communities in Borena, the semi-agrarian and also the pastoralists. So how has the situation affected the communities and their societal status or the society in general?
So for the semi-agrarian communities, such as Teltele, which is known for their mastiff production, you will see that they cannot farm because there's the lack of rain, the lack of water, and this puts a huge dent in their businesses and their livelihood because they also eat what they farm. Yeah. So that was the huge difference that you see for the semi-agrarian is their lack of business, their lack of food, and their lack of general business marketing. And for the pastoralists, it's the same. It's a little bit different because they really relied on their livestock. One common pastoralist could have from 200 to 300 cattle. Now you will see them with 0 to up to 5. Whoa. And the ones that you see that are alive and that they're with are very emaciated and have no value of market or interest of the buyer. Wow. So when it comes to their livelihood, their businesses, it has affected both almost similarly.
Obviously, the situation is very sad, as we've seen. The other area that's been affected by this drought, as you saw, is the market, including the cattle market, one of the largest cattle markets in Eastern African region. So how has this situation also affected the market? How severe or how hard has the market been hit?
So like you said, the Bekib market is well known in the entire East Africa region because of their cattle, their breed type, and their quality. However, when we went and visited the market, it was very, very almost depressing because there was barely any cattle there. And the cattle there, like I said, have no market value. They had other livestock such as camels and donkeys. Mm-hmm. And personally, that was the first time I ever saw an emaciated camel because I always assumed camels were strong and resilient to climate, yeah, especially drought and hot climate. So seeing an emaciated camel was very shocking for me. And you can see that there is no market or any type of business going on because I saw about 30 Isuzus just parked hoping to transport and have some sort of business, but they were just left hopeless. They were just parked there. Not one had any loaded cattle on there. So that was very, very shocking and very sad to see. Because that before I went there about 10 years ago. Okay. And that market was one of the tourist visiting areas because it was so active. There was just so much going on. You can see all different type of cattle being sold and transported, yeah, but that was it was non-existent. Yeah. And if you talk to the people that are selling the cattle, they will tell you the value of them have decreased, and some of them it's very obvious to see that even if they were transported, they would not reach their destination. So really has no market value for either one. Yeah, shocking indeed, shocking. Borena is known for its fattened cattle. Now it's another story. The places that was known for their red meat, and they just had different type of resilience, quality, breed type, but none of that was existent. And the second thing that Borena cattle was known for was their milk. Yes. They had such a mass export and import of their milk, and it was also part of the people's diet almost as a necessity. However, you will see that there is no milk there. And certain countries like Kenya have taken advantage of the situation, and their Borena people are now buying milk from Kenya. Whoa. And there's two major sources. They're called Damia and Mount Kenya, okay, and they sell about 300 milliliter for 60 birr. So that's even, I can't even imagine Borena people buying milk, but that's what's been going on in the market area there. So the drought is really changing, the narratives as well, the livelihoods of the people there. And I can imagine how devastating this could be, the Borena people buying milk. The ones that used to sell the abundance of milk, now buying milk. But they're buying milk from neighboring countries just because they need it, it has been part of their diet for so long. It is one of the hugest necessities, for the Borena people. So definitely sad.
Oh, yeah. So did you interview some people there as you visited, and what exactly did they tell you, especially after this devastating drought?
So I have interviewed like a couple of like civilians, and I have interviewed people that have been around the area for a little bit longer. So for example, in Teltele, I was able to interview one young woman and one young man, okay. And they were able to put in perspective for me what their daily lives look like, because usually the man was out farming and tending to his land, while the woman was tending to the cattle, making sure that everything in the household was prepared. However, now it's everybody's living like a uniform lifestyle, where everybody's living basically the same life. Nobody's in a better predicament than the other one. So they're all just gathering together, just helping as much as they can. They're sharing with their community. Yeah. So whenever aid comes, like if one family gets certain things, they're spreading it out and thinning it out with everybody.
With each other.
Exactly. So they will never really have enough, but they still help each other. They're still resourceful. One young lady told me that she wasn't to go to the nearest water source. They can't drive anymore, or they can't walk anymore. They have to use like motorcycles or any type of transportation that they can find. And once they're there, there's limitations on how much water they can take. In certain areas like Teltele, they only allow 1 can per person. So she said once they're done cooking, they have nothing left over for the next day, or to even drink with the food that they just cooked. And the man, you can see a lack of pride in the men, because they were so prideful in being the provider role. Yeah. And they cannot provide anymore for themselves or for their family. So they all just been gathering and just waiting for aid.
I've also seen in your article how this drought is affecting the Gada system, which is one of the most widely known and appreciated democratic systems. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So, for example, in the Gada system has already given certain type of gender roles. Like, for example, the men were mostly focused on the mobile resources, such as going out there, landing, defending their livestock, doing mostly like the farming and bringing in the needed things. And the women played more of the static resources, such as once the cattle is there, they milk them, make cheese, decide how much goes for the family, how much to sell, and what is needed. Yeah. And the reason the Gada system created that is because there will be some sort of codependency between these two genders, and that will build some sort of respect, because one cannot survive without the other. Yeah. However, during this drought, since everybody is living a uniform life, that codependency has disappeared. The woman cannot tell the man to go and provide. The man cannot come home and tell the woman to do certain things because he hasn't provided. So this kind of creates a lack of moral and respect for each other. And this creates something that has never been seen before, such as gender-based violence. And those have been, like, gender-based violence has been like noted and have been coming up in the surface ever since the drought has happened, and definitely would stream from that. And I would definitely say the other thing is, Borena people don't usually partake in activities such as like begging, or you will not see people like on the street asking you for money. And even this time, I was shocked to see that in the main cities, I still didn't witness like no begging or people asking for help, like straight walking up to you. Very proud people. Yeah. But once you start driving out to like the remote areas, the ones that are struck a little bit more harder, you will start seeing like women with children asking for help or like starting to beg. So I will say those two things, gender-based violence and begging, were the two major cultural difference and like a strike on the Gada system that I saw.
This is quite an experience for you, even if it's a bad one, a sad one, it's quite an experience. And I'm sure that you are somewhat a different person after the sad story. So what's the humbling aspect, if you like for you or for anyone that's gone there and seen the things and come back?
Okay, so before I went to Borena, I've been hearing about the drought, and I have seen some things on the news or on the TV. However, I feel like throughout my life, I have been desensitized to certain issues or to certain things like that, or when it comes to just TV in general. So going and seeing things in person just creates that humanity, or like it levels the relation that you have with people, and you're not thinking about anything else other than the fact that it's a human being going through this. So it really creates that humanity and that humbling experience through that. And the other thing is, whenever I'm conversing with like the civilians there, their pride, their energy, they're still smiling, and that just created a more humbling feeling to myself, because I know they're fighting for survival. I know they're fighting for a lot more bigger and serious issues than I have ever fought for in my life. So that has created a much, much more humbling experience for me.
Humbling indeed. Yeah, it's quite an experience. Let's also talk about the roles the media need to play in helping the Borena people in particular, and the people of Ethiopia or the region, affected by this drought in general. What are some of the roles that need to be played, especially in raising the awareness of the society, in soliciting funds, things like that? The people of Borena, how they have been affected, thanks to the media, now we are well aware of it, but I think they need to do more, especially in creating more awareness and how the people chip in or help. So what roles do you see for the media to play?
So I believe that the media is such a very powerful resource when it comes to like spreading awareness. The drought has been going on for about 3 years. This is the 5th cycle now. And the media was a little bit prolonged. They were delayed in response.
Overdue, kind of.
It was very overdue. Now, and you can see the power they have, because now once they started reporting, once you started seeing on TV, you can see the people that they're touching are not just private sectors, like people such as, let's say, like the coffee union, or whether it be Goldwater or Sugar City, or even just regular residents of Addis Ababa are showing concern, are starting to even want to donate. And even if they don't donate, there is word of mouth.
They show compassion.
They show compassion, yes. Yeah, and they spread the word. They make it like this is a real issue. And that is the power the media has, because it was an instant reaction. Like once the media started putting this on the news, you can see by the amount of aid that started coming in that media works, their role works. Yes. So in order to do that, all they have to do is strengthen it, spread it out more, spread more accurate information, utilize social media if need be, and just keep on just spreading the word, and as much as accurately as possible.
Talking about the media, not just local media, but also international media, with everybody, every concerned actors in the media landscape, right?
Yes. Like it's a huge difference of aid that is being provided by the NGOs plus aid that is brought out by awareness will definitely help like sustain at least for some amount of time.
Yeah. Let's also talk about the emergency response. What's your overall evaluation of the support going on there?
I specifically saw 2 types of emergency responses in Borena. Okay. One of them is distribution. So like the government, NGOs, and some private sectors were mostly focused on distributing like food, oil, water.
The basic needs.
The basic necessity needs. And this is a sustainable plan for now. As in, it will help prolong their life, but it's not a long-term sustainability. Exactly. And so, for example, when it comes to, I know the government, like the Addis Ababa city administrator was able to donate some water tankers. I know CARE donated food like wheat, flour, whatever they needed. Yeah. And then UNICEF was focused mostly on school feeding. So they were able to make sure kids had food. And it was mostly just making sure that the necessity of these people were provided. And then the second type of emergency response I saw was with the Ethiopian Red Cross. The one different thing that I saw was cash transfer. So this was mostly seen in Moyale, I would say. So in Moyale, what the Red Cross did was very effective, efficient, and very transparent, because with cash transfer, you can trigger and you can specifically target the need of the people. So if I give you cash, you can go and buy whatever needed commodities you need. So that creates the effectiveness because you are not depending on emergency limited donations. And with the efficiency, it gets transferred directly to your bank account, or whenever a bank account is open for you, you'll have access to that money. And when it comes to the transparency, it is accounted for. Donors can see where their money is going. They can feel comfortable by the idea that their donations are reaching the people that need to be reached. So witnessing cash transfer was a very different type of emergency response that I didn't expect, but it was a good response technique that I saw, I would say. However, it had its limitations also, like for Teltele, Moyale, it was prosperous because they had market access. But then when it comes to Dilo, it was a very, very remote area. So they don't have any remote access to they don't have any market access, like everywhere they go. So that was a very, that was different type of responses, but it was pretty interesting to see the different ways.
Talking about the aid, this is, obviously a short-term support to save the lives of the people from death and starvation. Yes. So obviously there must be some kind of strategy put in place to curb the issue of climate-induced drought in Borena and its environs. So how should the government or every actor, for that matter, share to the sustainability of the support that need to be rendered to Borena, and also to help them become, self-sufficient, if you will?
So I would say, in order to create a long-term sustainable development strategy, Ethiopia needs to not only focus on just Borena, because climate change is a reoccurring issue, and it's not just always affecting Borena, like we also see some in Afar and things like that. So what they need, it's not just a responsibility of just one sector or one ministry. It should be seen as a national issue, and the government needs to take more of like a leading role while the others play an assisting role, because the government will have access, they have power, they have structure. So all they have to do is work synchronizedly or in a concerted method. They just need to come up with a strategy and a long-term plan and make sure that it has been carried out. And even when it comes to NGOs or any private sectors, all these things can do is play assisting roles while the government takes the leading role and creates things that are needed. For example, some human factors that add into drought is like overpopulation of cattle, overuse of land, like grazing. Certain policies can be put in place for situations like these because it's not a new issue. It is reoccurring, and as we know, climate change is very unpredictable, so it also creates the urgency for these type of matters.
Exactly. Talking about cooperation, this climate-induced drought is not just an issue of Ethiopians in general or Borena in particular. It's an issue of the entire region in the East African nation. So obviously the entire nations in the East African region need to collaborate for lasting solutions. So as someone who is a concerned citizen, as an African, what are some of your suggestions in this regard? What should be done?
I would say what needs to be done is, first and foremost, climate change needs to be perceived as a natural disaster. Mm-hmm. The urgency, when we hear the word climate change, there needs to be a certain type of urgency that we feel. And once that happens, not just, like you said, Ethiopians, but the entire East African countries that are always seeing some sort of climate change crisis need to come together and create an action plan or just some sort of strategy plan for when climate change strikes, because it will, and there is no avoiding it, there is no changing it. However, there is always preparing for it, and the best way to prepare for it is to cooperate together as a unison and as a synchronized method. So NGOs can definitely help by giving certain resources that are needed. For example, with the Borena drought, we have seen a lot of malnutrition. However, there's a lack of nutritionist experts or people that you can have access to that NGOs can provide to target certain issues or to more, let's say, spread out and help the people that need to be helped, whether it be with medicine, especially with the children that are seeing like some sort of malnutrition on. They can always thin out their resources, However, it's all about prioritizing what needs to come first, because with NGOs, they're covering all sorts of disasters. For example, let's say with the UNICEF or the UN, like we know, for example, there was an earthquake in Turkey, or there's a flood in Syria, and there's always some issue going on in the world. However, it's mostly about prioritizing and seeing climate change also as a natural disaster.
Yes, yes. One final question. Obviously, this drought has affected the people from all walks of life, but which part of the society do you think is most affected by this drought?
Personally, I would say that the most group of people that were affected the most would be the elderly and the children. However, I would say it's more dire and more urgent for the elderly just in Borena, because for the Gada system, elderly people are key players, right, and are needed for the functionality of the Gada system, because it is an age-based and age-set system. So within their culture, elderlies usually eat last. They make sure that the women and the children and then the young are provided. Yeah, they're always the provider. They make sure that they are fed first. So they are more concerned about prolonging their life while they're shortening theirs. And when there's emergency, whenever NGOs or any sort of aid first appears, the first people that are always treated are the women and the children. And this kind of abandons and puts the elderly people behind. However, like I said, they're needed for the Gada system. And the preservation of the elderly should be seen as the same as preserving democracy for these communities, because elderlies are needed there. And they are also needed to put Borena back into structural function once the drought passes. Yeah. And so I would definitely say they were the most vulnerable ones, the most vulnerable communities there.
This is really heartbreaking.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you have any final message that you want to convey before we wrap up our discussion?
I would say the one message I have definitely is to be as humble as possible, to definitely help, donate, reach out. And it doesn't have to be in a form of money, it doesn't have to be in a form of food. Just spreading awareness, whether it be on social media or whether it be with talking with people, is always just communicate, be humble, and help as much as you can, to be honest, because there's always people in need of help.
Dawi, thank you so much for those wonderful ideas, and thank you especially, for going there in person and witnessing the, horrific, the sad stories going on there, and also sharing your ideas and, sharing your views, what should be done. Thanks a lot, really. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Of course, I appreciate it.
With that, we come to the end of today's program. Thank you so much for your company so far. Till I see you next time with another program. It's goodbye from me, Shvaronak.